Hi, Geeky Pastimes here, and in today's video I'm going to look at 5 different ways I think you can help yourself to improve at Warzone. Now, I'm not pretending that I'm the best at Warzone. We win our fair share of games, but we also lose a lot of games too, and I'm not getting like 30 kills in a game or anything like that. But I am kind of aware of the things that sometimes I do that maybe aren't so helpful, some of the things that maybe make me stop from progressing at Warzone, and I'm also kind of trying to do some things to make myself better, like ways to help myself practice, ways to help myself improve in the future. So if you do find this video useful, please do like and subscribe, and if you want to support me, please do go over to Twitch and give me a follow on there. I'd really appreciate all the follows I could get on Twitch, so thanks a lot if you go over there and help me there. So let's get on to the top 5 tips to help yourself improve at Warzone. The first thing you need to do is blame yourself more. Now, I'm more guilty of this than anyone else, but it's all too easy to blame your team's poor performance on your teammates. They might have made a bad call, they might have missed their shots, they didn't give you the info they need. I do this all the time. But if you put the blame on others and don't accept responsibility, you're never going to get any better. I read on a Reddit post ages ago about Heroes of the Storm back in the day, and they said, you can't control the rest of your team. All you can control are your own actions, so that's the thing that you need to work on. It's the same thing when people blame hackers, lag, hit registration, the server tick rate or anything else. Yeah, of course there's occasional times when those things clearly get you killed, but that's definitely a tiny percentage of your overall losses. Most of the time you made a mistake, you could have done something better, and that's what you need to work on. Now, to improve your own skills, play solos. It's way harder in other game modes, partly because you don't have a safety net, you don't have anyone to come and res you, but also because all of the mistakes you make are going to be your own. You don't have someone else to blame. And that can actually be kind of frustrating and kind of difficult at times. I think that's why loads of random people queue up in quads, even if they're by themselves. It's just a lot easier to sort of think that when you do well, it's all because of you, and when you do badly, it's because of somebody else. Solos doesn't give you any kind of get out. Everything you do is entirely down to you, and your performance is entirely down to you. If you do want to play with randoms in group modes, always be trying to think about what you could be doing to help them. Could you give them more information? Did you share your money with them? Did you keep up with them and pay attention to all of their pings? Always try to blame yourself first and think what you could do differently before you start going around blaming other people or assuming that you did everything right and it was someone else's fault. The only thing you can improve is your own behaviour, your own actions, so work on that first. Now, the second thing on this list is another thing that I've struggled with in the past, and that's being prepared to back off. When you watch big streamers, because if you're trying to improve, often you watch like the best players, you're going out and watching Vicstar and then you want to try and play like him. It's always impressive how they always seem to push seemingly unwinnable situations and then still come out on top. They'll land back on their gear after a death and manage to take out the one that killed them with just a pistol. They'll take on a full team of 4 by themselves and win. They'll lose all their armor but push anyway and still get the win. That's because they're amazing players, and even then it doesn't always work out for them. You should always try and read the situation and be aware when you're in a bad spot. You might not have the same kind of skill to turn those kind of impossible looking situations around, so instead you need to be aware of when you can push and when you can't. Think about how much ammo you've got left, how many players know where you are, how much armor do you have on, where's the circle. If you can improve your position compared to the enemies, it's probably better to do that rather than getting into an engagement you're probably going to lose. And we all have that feeling, like when you're about to rush into an engagement and you think, this probably isn't going to work. Think, did you actually need to take that engagement? Obviously the situations where you can't help it, where you're trapped or where it's near the final circle so you've got a lot less options, but most of the time you've got a choice about whether to engage or not, or at least how you're going to engage. If you're in the middle of a firefight, there's normally opportunities, as long as you've got some kind of cover, where you can run back a little bit, where you can move around, maybe you can rotate around and do something different. You don't always need to be popping up just to shoot. Think about if you're in a situation where you're behind a bit of cover but they're on a rooftop. Even if you kill them, they're probably just going to go down and then get rezzed by their teammates, and you're not going to be able to do anything about that. So why don't you change your position, change the way you're engaging them, maybe try and sneak up on them, or maybe try and get above them somehow, and force them to be able to go into an engagement that's more favourable to you. If your squad's way behind you, back off and wait for them for a little bit. If the enemy knows where you are, reposition. If you're going to get hit by the gas in a second, maybe back off a bit, try and get into the zone, and then turn around and get ready to take out the enemies when they have to make the same decision. If you're the one to make that decision first, you're going to have an advantage. You always want to be the one deciding where and how you're going to fight if you can. And you always want to be the one that has more information. Often that means you need to run away, maybe as quietly as possible so they don't even notice you've gone, and then set up to re-engage in a better place. Don't be that annoying person on the squad who dies in a 1v4 while you've got enough money to buy your whole team back just because you are thirsting for kills. Number 3, use the intel. This game provides you with an insane amount of information in every situation, and loads of people I watch seem to be ignoring it all the time. The more intel you have, the better position you're in and the better decisions you can make. If you're a player like me who probably won't win based on reaction speed and aiming skill, it's always a good idea to try and get the upper hand where you can get it. For example, we all know that when we see a red dot flash up on a minimap, that means someone's firing a weapon. But think about what else that might tell you. If they're shooting at somebody else, so there's probably 2 teams involved. If you hear a short sharp burst, then nothing, somebody probably just died. If you hear a sniper rifle, the teams are probably a long way away, so the shooter's probably not expecting a close range fight, you might be able to sneak up and get the upper hand. If you hear loads of different people shooting, whoever's left when it calms down a little bit is probably weak and repairing up. Or someone might be running for a buy station to try and buy the rest of their team back into the game. So think about the situation, look at what's going on around them in the map, and then think about what's the best opportunity you have. If you can third party a fight that's already going on, chances are you're going to be able to do pretty well and get a load of kills. Whereas if you roll onto a team that's actually in quite a good situation and set up and waiting for you, you're going to have a bad time. Everything in this game also makes a distinctive sound. You can hear a loadout drop being called in before it drops. You can hear the recon missions being activated, people brought back in. They all make individual sounds. When people are parachuting near you, it seems like enemies actually make a different sound to your teammates, so you can kind of tell when someone's parachuting in around you. Obviously there are some things on the map that actually confuse this, like some of the tents make a sound that sounds a lot like a parachute closing, so you need to be a little bit careful. On the map, you can see contracts disappear when they're picked up. If a scavenger near you gets picked up, maybe that team don't have great gear and might even be split up going for the boxes. I know often with our team, one person will go for a box while the others try and anticipate where the next box is going to be. If a bounty disappears near you and then you suddenly get an alert that there's a bounty on you, you probably know which direction they're coming from. One of the key overlooked things are the loadout drops that come down at sort of various intervals in the map. The number of crates that drop tell you the number of teams that are nearby. One loadout crate is safe to get, there's nobody else near you. It's just you in that area. 2 means there's one other team somewhere close. Each loadout drop drops, I think, at a maximum of 200 meters away from you, so you can kind of work out how close the other teams are going to be. In the final zone, this is a little bit less useful because obviously all of the drops are going to come down and you're going to see that there's one for every single team there. But in the early loadout drops, it's actually really useful to see where people are. If you're kind of high up or you can see a long way, you can kind of see where there's groups of teams and where there's maybe 1 or 2 teams. So you can decide, based on how confident you're feeling, whether you want to go into a big fight or whether you want to try and pick out some of the stragglers. Looking ahead is really important too. If you're chasing a bounty, think about where it's going to leave you even if you manage to win. You don't want to end up at the bottom of dam if the zone's going to be at the top of dam. You don't want to end up in a massive open field if there's going to be other people in the area who could take you out. Always try to be a step ahead or 2 steps ahead, thinking about, okay, after we do this, this is where we're going to go, or this is the situation we're going to be in. Also, and probably more importantly, think about the intel you don't have. UAVs and heartbeat sensors don't show players with Ghost, so that UAV scan showing one player alone might actually be a full team, but they're just the one person who doesn't have Ghost on that team. If you don't know where the circle's going to be, think about the worst possible case scenario and plan around that. If you can see one enemy, think about where their teammates could be. If somebody runs out of a building, don't go running out into the open to immediately try and chase them down. They might have a whole team running behind them. Always try to sort of think about what's the worst thing that could be happening and plan to make sure you're covered for that. Over time, you do get better at assuming certain things about how players are going to move or position themselves. You get better map knowledge and you start realizing, okay, that person's doing that. They're running towards a buy station, out of cover. They're probably desperately trying to buy someone back. So that's the sort of situation where you think, okay, now I can engage. But until you're confident enough to decide that, assume you're always in the worst possible situation. And just try to think about, keeping cover, so keeping a building behind you. Or if you're moving along a hillside, maybe don't stand at the very top of the ridge if you don't know where people are going to be. And you can make use of all of these ideas against your opponent too. Think about what they don't know. If they don't know where you are, stay quiet, or maybe slam a door but don't run through it just to try and make them think that you've gone the wrong way. Don't use a sniper scope if you don't have to, because otherwise that glint is going to show everyone in the area exactly where you are. Keep windows unbroken so people who are trying to snipe you can't see through thermals. If you've got one player who doesn't have Ghost, maybe make sure the rest of the team are in a kind of decent position to ambush someone who is going after that one player. Finally, when you do have intel, share it. It's so frustrating to be in a team where people die and then they spend all their time moaning about how they died, rather than passing on everything you know in the middle of a firefight. In an engagement, try to be careful about what you say. Don't talk over other people if you don't have to. Give specific directions on the compass, or numbers, how many players are left. Try to give intel that's useful. Don't shout over the mic about how it was unfair or how you made a mistake. Just try to give useful info, because remember, your teammates are still in the middle of a fight. They might be listening out for footsteps. They're trying to work out what just happened to you. Don't tell your team you nearly had them if you're not actually sure they're on low health. I see this with streamers all the time, where they shout that someone's one shot, when really they only got one shot off on that person, so that person's probably still near full armor. And now the streamer's team might take a stupid risk trying to track down that one person or trying to kill them, when really they're actually in a much worse situation than they think they are. Also, try to avoid using phrases like over there or behind me. Your team probably weren't watching exactly which way you were pointing, so things like that aren't particularly helpful. Try to give a compass direction or talk about landmarks. If you can say, okay, they're on the second floor in the green building, that's way more useful than saying they're over there. Now, the fourth thing we're going to talk about is about not being a slave to the meta. The Grau is king at the moment. It's by far the best gun. It's incredibly accurate. It does quite a lot of damage. And over the next patch, it's probably going to get nerfed. They've already said that they're going to do a weapons balancing pass, so we assume the Grau's not going to be as good as it used to be. So after the next patch, it might be the M13 or the Galil or the Kilo, who knows. But don't think that just because you've got the gun that's in the current meta, you're invincible. Or don't think that an enemy that's using a Grau is necessarily definitely going to beat you just because they've got that best gun. When you land, you'll often end up with whatever the floor guns are at the moment, and most of the guns are viable in a fight. The difference between a meta gun and the worst gun in the game, if you're at short range, is actually pretty small. LMGs might take a while to set up, but they can shred if you're holding an angle and expecting someone to run around a corner. Shotguns might generally be terrible in Warzone, but they can take people by surprise if you manage to get the drop on them. Pistols can even take people down quickly if you can land your shots. That first pistol you have when you start, you can kill someone pretty fast with it, especially if they've got their back to you, so they don't have time to return anything. Try to be prepared to use what's available, and don't pass up on weapons just because they're not what you want, especially in the early game. Take what you can get and learn to use it. I even managed to one-shot kill from a distance with a slug shotgun the other day, and I thought they were absolutely useless, but if I hadn't have picked it up, I wouldn't have been able to get that kill. Like in any online game, the meta is going to change a lot, and that means that some people who have just been playing recently and have got really good with the Grau, they're actually going to be in a pretty bad situation if that's all they ever use. Try to make sure you use a wide variety, and then when the meta changes up, you'll still be in a pretty good position to just learn whatever's the next best thing. Now, the last thing we're going to be talking about today is camping, and why you definitely shouldn't be camping if you're trying to get better at the game. If you're having a few bad games in a row, it's really tempting to camp. You can get to a higher place fairly easily, and you're less likely to be taken by surprise. You're less likely to die immediately at the start of a game if you go somewhere very quiet and just hide in a room. You can set up on a rooftop or a building with a few entryways and just watch the entrance. But there's three really big problems with camping. Firstly, Modern Warfare actually gives you quite a lot of good tools to deal with campers. As soon as someone knows that you're camping and roughly where you are, they could use drones, snapshot grenades, UAVs, heartbeat sensors, or tactical grenades and explosives, all to work out exactly where you are. Then they can rush, they can throw things through weird angles, calling kill streaks, and generally make your life a misery. It's not that hard to take out campers in this game, so it's not often like a winning strategy just to camp. It does sometimes work, but it's still a coin flip, and if you're holding up in a room or on a rooftop and the enemy know that you're there, they have every advantage and every option, and you've suddenly become incredibly predictable, so they can take that engagement however they want to, or they can just leave you alone. Secondly, camping's really boring. Camping and waiting for things is not a lot of fun, and it's going to make you burn out on the game much quicker. You're not going to have any of those crazy moments that you see in videos. You're not going to have fun with your friends. You're just going to get a placement number at the end that's slightly higher than usual and doesn't really mean anything. People who are camping rarely win games. They just survive until the final circles and then die to someone who's more active. My least favourite matches are those where we have long periods of inactivity, then lose in the first gunfight we get into 10 minutes into the game. It's just wasted time. I'd rather have 2 really frantic and worse playing matches in the same time period as one game where we end up not sitting around not doing much. Thirdly, camping doesn't help you improve. You need to practice and get good at Battle Royale games, and that practice mostly comes from firefights and engagements. Everyone's already good at camping because it's easy. If you're learning to play a musical instrument, you don't keep playing the same song you've already perfected. You try to play something that's too difficult in order to get better at it. You need to challenge yourself, throw yourself out of your comfort zone, and in Warzone that means getting into fights. When we're trying to improve at Warzone, we take bounties, pick up most wanted contracts, drop in busy zones. It can be frustrating, and you'll die a lot, and you'll fail a lot, but you'll also get much better at the game over time and have more fun doing it. Of course, there are a few situations where it makes sense to camp. Sometimes if you're doing a most wanted contract to get your whole team back, you probably want to hide a little bit if you know there's enemy players nearby and hope that they don't see you. Sometimes if it's right near the final zone and you've got a really good position, you might want to stay there because you don't want to just run out into the open and die for the sake of it. But those are specific circumstances. Whenever you do camp, be aware that you're making the game way more boring for yourself and you're going to be making a lot less progress than if you went out guns blazing. So, if you've enjoyed these tips, like I said, please do like and subscribe. Please go follow me on Twitch. On Twitter, I'm at Geeky Pastimes. Really appreciate any of the follows, any of the support through that. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye. Behind these rocks.
Found one.
Finished him.
There we go.
Go up.
Nice.
Got him.
Okay.